Hello and welcome to the latest presentation from Kavango Resources. This evening, we're an event directly ourselves. My name is Ben Turney. I'm joined this evening by my director, Hillary, who's one of our co-founders. Hillary was the original inspiration behind the business and has provided a great deal of technical support. He's a geophysicist by background, and Hillary's inspiration has really been a key driving force for Kavango. We're also joined this evening by Jeremy Brett. Jeremy joined us in February last year. He's been working as a consultant. Jeremy worked on our flagship project in the Kalahari Suture Zone 20 years ago. When we first met Jeremy, it turned out he'd been Kavango's progress quite closely. So in an excellent fit to the company. He's got a long career, very experienced in looking for nickel sulphide deposits, and helped us significantly expand on Hillary's technical vision. So this evening, Jeremy will be presenting the new Iocg for the Great Red Spot within the Kalahari Suture Zone. This is a very distinct target. Our magmatic sulphide model is still in play. We'll be publishing results on that, hopefully in the near future. But as you'll see tonight, a lot of work has gone into this presentation, and we hope you enjoy the results. So Jeremy, can I hand over to you, please?
Yes, that sounds great, Brett.
So to begin with, we just put the disclaimer up on the screen. We just have to leave that up there a few seconds so everybody can read that. And then here's your first slide, Jeremy.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, good evening, and we're going to be talking about the Kalahari Suture Zone tonight and the projects of Kavango in this area. This is located in southwestern Botswana. As you can see on this map, this is an aeromagnetic map of the entire country of Botswana. The Kalahari Suture Zone is very prominent. It's shown in the southwest as a north-south striking feature. It's a magnetic feature indicating these are probably related to intrusions of some sort. And so this in itself is quite interesting. It's sitting at the edge of a large, cool craton, which is a very good spot for intrusions, and intrusions in this type of context could be quite important for hosting mineralization. So this is what's drawn people to this part of Botswana for decades, literally. And Kavango has proposed that this could be a very good host environment for nickel, copper, and PGE deposits. And this has been Kavango's focus for the past several years. There's another type of target that seems to be emerging based on this data. It's also been known for decades, and it's been labeled by previous explorers as the Great Red Spot. And it's labeled on this diagram. You can see the red pointer going towards it. And this is a large magnetic body. It's modeled as having about a 5 kilometer by 8 kilometer causative body. And this lies at the northern end of the Kalahari Suture Zone. So it's a target within a larger target zone. This is a map that was published in the Journal of African Earth Sciences almost 20 years ago. And it represents a structural analysis based on the same aeromagnetic data set. As you can see, there are multiple structures that are intersecting the Kalahari Suture Zone. The Kalahari Suture Zone is a north-south striking feature, shown in yellow. And at the north end of the KSZ, we've got multiple structures that intersect each other at a given point. And this happens to be the location of the Great Red Spot. So structures can be very important for creating rock permittivity, in that you're breaking up the rock, and this can lead to intrusions. It can also lead to the conductance of alteration systems in the form of hot fluids. So this seems to be a locus for potential intrusions and potentially various types of mineralization. And we have proposed that this could be a very good location for an iron oxide copper-gold type system as well. This is the anatomy of an iron oxide copper-gold system, or an Iocg. And the way these things work are you have a very large intrusions, and these are 10 kilometer plus intrusions. They're very, very big. And these intrude at depth. They provide heat, they provide magma, they provide fluids related to the intrusion. And they can also provide smaller intrusions coming off of these. Then you can have fluids that are coming off of the smaller intrusion. So you have a very big system. It's a very big heat system, essentially. And what they can do is they can drive alteration systems. So you've got a large hot intrusion that could be driving essentially a hot water system. And those can lead to, in the case of IOCGs, they can lead to various types of iron oxide alteration. As you can see here, we've labeled that you can have magnetite associated with these. That would be quite magnetic. And then you can have hematite, which is not magnetic, but it's going to be quite dense, quite heavy, and that could lead to gravity anomalies. So this is the type of scenario that you would be looking for, ideally, to host an IOCG type system. This is actually geophysics from space. This is a satellite gravity map of Botswana. And I've been using these more and more for various projects to look at a country scale and look at the country scale context for various projects. You can see that we've pointed out a large deep gravity anomaly. And this is sitting at the northern tip of the KSZ. And it's also sitting just off to the side of the location of the Great Red Spot, which we've shown as the black dot here. And so this is quite interesting because this large gravity anomaly could actually be the gravity feature that's associated with a large batholith type intrusion, which is one of the elements that we've been looking for. And its proximity right next to the Great Red Spot is potentially very interesting in that it could be the heat system that's been driving an alteration system, such as an IOCG at that location. This is a closer look at IOCG systems. This is a schematic model. And we've got the top of the batholith shown at the bottom. We have an intrusion coming off the batholith. Then we have various alteration type events that are happening above the intrusion. And what's key here is that you end up with a footprint of various types of alteration, especially the magnetite, which is magnetic. You then get the hematite, which is oxidized iron oxide, which is quite dense, not nearly as magnetic, but quite dense. You can have pyrite in the system. And then we've also got shown the various dotted lines here, and these are the potential zones of interest for various economically interesting minerals. And this is where you can have the copper, gold, and perhaps even uranium in some of these deposits. So this is a kilometer scale look at what we would be hoping to see at the Great Red Spot. And it's key to point out the magnetite and the hematite. These are very key factors. This is the Great Red Spot. So this is a magnetic anomaly. It's quite large, as mentioned, 12,000 nanoteslas in amplitude, and it's multi-kilometers in size. It's been known since the 1970s. It was first seen on country scale airborne surveys. This is an airborne survey flown by Kavango with greater detail, and this is what we've used for modeling. And so this has actually allowed us to upgrade the IOCG model for Kavango and try to determine, does it have potential and where would it have potential? Now, one key thing on this is that we're showing two drill holes. This in the center, you've got GRS1. This is an historical drill hole drilled around the year 2000. And it actually intersected Proterozoic basement. It was a gabbro that it intersected. And then KSZDD001 is a drill hole that was drilled by Kavango. This also intersected gabbro in the Proterozoic basement, but it also intersected 4% magnetite. This is potentially interesting, and this has to be verified by a petrologist and geochemist, but it has some potential to perhaps relate to an IOCG system because you're starting to see this iron oxide. So this is starting to get quite interesting. This is geophysical modeling. So we've run inversions of the aeromagnetic data. This is the aeromagnetic data that was acquired by Kavango. And we've done two types of inversion modeling. One is to model the larger, deeper features, and you can see these in the background in the continuous color. So these are the bigger features in the basement, which probably more represent the Proterozoic. And then I've also run a shorter wavelength filter inversion of the data. And this is showing more discrete features. So you can see that these are highlighted here. This is the Great Red Spot up at the top. Just as a check, can everyone see that my cursor is moving on the screen? Or can we see Ben's cursor moving? Ben, if you could point to these things for me, that would be great. But so at the top, we've got the Great Red Spot. And then sitting above the Great Red Spot, we've modeled more fine scale magnetic features. And you can see that we've modeled a smaller, more discrete feature that's in the shape of a ring that's sitting above the Great Red Spot. So we feel that this could have exploited the structure around the edge of the Great Red Spot, that you have some sort of a ring structure around the edge of the Proterozoic intrusion in the basement, which is the larger feature that you can see modeled. And then we may have a series of vertical dikes that are intruding into the Karoo sediments above. So this is in the top 950 meters. And then you could have a series of sills that are coming off of those dikes. So this is potentially very interesting as well, because this is a theory that's been proposed by Hillary and by Kavango, that these Karoo intrusives could have significant potential for nickel, copper, and PGEs. So in this sense, we have two stacked ore deposit models that both have potential in the same vicinity. And going back to one of the previous slides, we mentioned the multiple structures that intersect at the Great Red Spot. So it's entirely possible that you have more permittivity in the rock is more broken, the Earth's crust is more broken and deformed, and that you've got more potential for these intrusions to come through at this location. Now we're also showing on this slide that you've got multiple intrusions over the rest of the slide. Going due south to the Great Red Spot, you've got what we call the 30-kilometer strike, and that consists of probably both Karoo rocks and Proterozoic rocks, which we are also investigating. So a lot of potential in the same area for intrusions and related mineralization. It's really quite interesting. This is a map of the world, and this is showing various Iocg deposits around the world. We're using seismic velocity as a proxy for the Earth's crust. So thickened portions of the Earth's crust, or cratons as we call them, these are old and colder portions of the crust, quite thick, and they've been accreted over millennia to produce large, stable bits of continents. And what's interesting is that most of the Iocg deposits around the world, as you can see with the yellow dots, are located at the edge of these cratons. And this could make a lot of sense, because at the edges of cratons, you've got faulting, you've got fracturing, and these deep-seated faults will tap down into the Earth's mantle, and these would be great conduits for intrusions. So you can see, looking around the world, that most of the world's Iocg deposits are located at the edge of these blue-colored zones, which are indicative of cratons. And we've shown the Great Red Spot in the bottom center, and this is sitting at the edge of the Capel Craton. So this simply shows that this is a good location to have an Iocg intrusion. This is a geological plan map of Olympic Dam in Australia. Olympic Dam is one of the most famous Iocg deposits. It's absolutely huge. It is by far the biggest in the world. And this map shows that they're also quite complex. The geology is complicated in terms of lithology, but also alteration. You can see the scale bar at the bottom. That this is a kilometer scale bar at the bottom. So the body itself is multiple kilometers both directions, but within that you've got kilometer scale features, both in terms of rock types and also alteration. So this is the type of resolution that we feel you would need in order to target one of these Iocg type of situations. And we're going to get onto that in a moment in terms of how we're tackling that geophysically. But to the point here is that the zone is big, but the targets within that are actually smaller. They're smaller than kilometer scale. This is the same geology in section, and essentially showing the same thing, that you've got features that are less than a kilometer in scale. The overall target itself is quite big, it's multiple kilometers, but within that you've got smaller features, both in terms of rock types and alteration, that you need to resolve in order to properly target an Iocg. And we have proposed to tackle this with audiomagnetotellurics, which we're going to show you next. But before we do that, we're going to show you the magnetics. So this is the magnetics again. We've got the Great Red Spot on the left. This is a magnetic inversion. And you can see from the scale, we've got a causative body that's about 5 kilometers by 8 kilometers. And this is an inversion calculated from Kavango's Airborne Magnetic Survey. On the right, we have a magnetic inversion of the Olympic Dam. And this is calculated from public domain data from Australia. The the shapes are very similar. I mean, one major difference is Olympic Dam seems to have a portion that's open to the west, but also there's more magma that seems to exist to the southwest. But essentially, the main body in both cases is very similar. It's a similar size, similar shape, and also a similar sort of coronal-like feature around the edge. That you've got what look like bits of intrusion that are sticking up at the edge of the larger intrusion. So the similarity is actually quite uncanny. This is a combined inversion. We have the magnetics, same magnetic conversion shown in pink, and we also have an inversion of the ground gravity data. And this is pretty much as you see at Olympic Dam. You've got a coincident magnetic anomaly, and it's coincident or pretty sort of semi-coincident with a gravity anomaly. And so these bodies are pretty much mapping out the same causative feature. The density is probably caused by the intrusive rock type, but it could also be caused by iron oxide that's related to the Iocg system. And then the magnetics would be caused by magnetite, either in the intrusion or intrusion plus in an Iocg alteration system. I should point out that one of the big differences between Kavango's target and Olympic Dam is Olympic Dam has about 300 meters of cap rock over top of it, and Kavango's target lies at about 950 meters depth. So we're about 600 meters deeper. But aside from that, the models are surprisingly similar. So what this slide is showing is that you have a coincidence between the magnetic anomaly and the gravity anomaly. These were the criteria used for targeting Olympic Dam. They drilled essentially just on those two criteria, and we've got those. Now on to the audio magnetotellurics. So audio magnetotellurics, it's a different geophysical method. This is a resistivity method, and it's really an interesting method in that you can see quite deep into the earth. And so what we're doing is we're measuring sources from far field thunderstorms and then calculating resistivity. So this is a third variable that we can use. I would point out that Western Mining didn't have AMT data when they drilled Olympic Dam back in the 1970s. And the reason we conducted AMT surveys was to try and use a different variable geophysically, but also get a feel for the shape of what's going on at depth, and also what's happening in the crew above the target. So Hillary ran AMT surveys. We did 2 test profiles, as you can see here, a north-south profile and an east-west profile over the Great Red Spot. And this allowed us to get resolution of resistivity down to about 2 kilometers. And so this is getting well into what we feel is the target depth from 1 kilometer to 2 kilometers, essentially for this scenario. And we're going to conduct more AMT data. These are the results. This is the north-south section across the Great Red Spot. We've marked off the edges of the Great Red Spot, as you can see, with the dashed lines. This is based on the magnetics and the gravity modeling. And within that, we have a lot of complexity. And this is what I was hoping to see. If you look on the left side of the section, you can see that once you get through the Karoo sediments into the Proterozoic basement, it's all very consistent, all very uniform. That's what I didn't want to see. And we don't see that. We see complexity. So within the Great Red Spot, we see these variations in resistivity. You can see we've marked them with these ovals. So these are changes in the basement below the Karoo. And then at the north end of the section, we've got something quite drastic, actually. This is either a large fold or a deformation. Ben, if you could just point to the Proterozoic in the basement right there. That's either a large fold, so deformation of the basement, or it could be another intrusion within the intrusion, so to speak. So this is actually getting complicated, and complicated generally is quite good for looking for ore deposits. You want complications, you want structural complexity, you want changes. And so where we're taking this is that, this is, first off, what we would want to see. Secondly, going back to the previous slide where we highlighted the complexity in Olympic Dam, the complexity in terms of rock types and alteration types, these black ovals are showing potential zones of interest. And we think this is our first step towards identifying targets over the Great Red Spot. That you've got these changes, and for this type of model, changes are good. You want to see complexity, you want to see changes in rock properties, and these we are hoping are going to be able to be developed into targets for this scenario. One other interesting thing to note is if you look at the Karoo sediments above the horizontal black line, so this is in the top 950 meters. I'm not sure if anyone has seen this sort of data before for the Karoo in Botswana. You can see that on the left side of the section, you have a lot of flat-lying signatures. This makes a lot of sense for flat-lying sediments. We were expecting to see this all the way across the Great Red Spot, but we don't. In the middle, you see what's probably, actually a bit to the left, Ben, you see what's probably a thrust fault, a dipping thrust fault right there. And then you see what's probably folding. And so this is a bit of a surprise that the Karoo sediments could actually be deformed, could be folded like this. And what this potentially means is that you've got a deformation event, maybe related to some of those structures that we were talking about earlier that intersect in the area of the Great Red Spot. And you could have actually had a compressional event. You could have had a shortening of the Earth's crust. And this has led to a lot of folding. And these types of deformation events, again, are quite potentially interesting for ore deposits and ore deposit models. You have a lot of folding, a lot of faulting. You can conduct a lot of fluids. You can place intrusions. This is all looking quite good and quite interesting for ore deposit models in this area. This is an east-west section. So this is cutting across the north side of the Great Red Spot, and we've shown the Great Red Spot and from the magnetics and gravity again with the dashed line. And once again, we have potential zones of interest. We have all these complex areas that are beneath the Karoo Proterozoic contact. This again, we think is leading us towards targeting, being able to target in this area. We're going to be extending this area to the east. It didn't go all the way across the red spot. We're going to be doing that. We're also going to be adding more north-south lines to get more blanket coverage over the Great Red Spot. The other aspect of the test was that we used two different station spacings. This is 100-meter station spacing. The previous section was using 50-meter station spacings. And after Hillary and I looked at this, we both agreed that 50 meters is the way to go, that the resolution from the 50-meter stations is really quite powerful in this scenario. So you can see we don't see quite as much resolution. Yeah, right there. We don't see quite as much resolution in the top 950 meters with the 100-meter stations as we do with the 50-meter stations. And this was part of the process. This was a test to see what can we resolve and how do we tune the surveys to both keep them cost effective, but also to resolve what we need for figuring out what is down there, what is down in the Great Red Spot.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. So before we take any questions, let's bring Hillary in on this. And Hillary, can we start just asking you to share just some of your thoughts and experiences of work that you've done in the Great Red Spot, because obviously you've been largely responsible for gathering all of the data and a lot of the interpretation. We obviously have in front of us here the combined magnetic and gravity data. Just walk us through a bit about the methods that you followed, the technology you've used, and how you've put all this together.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. We were attracted, just consistent with what Jeremy was saying, we were attracted to this Great Red Spot location by the large magnetic trend which forms the KSZ. And in particular, one of our very first licenses was on the Great Red Spot, which was the PA 163 of 2012. The main attraction there was the major structures at the intersection of which we now find this Great Red Spot. In fact, unknowingly, we had not realized that previously, at that time when we took the licenses, but just interpreting the government Aeromark data, it was a very attractive location. So we took up licenses there, and we've since followed those licenses with some airborne surveys, looking for detailing structures. We've also done some airborne EM together with the magnetics. We've done a lot of modeling, controlled using all the data, the historic data information that is there. And we've now, we then followed up from the modeling, we then followed up with some detailed ground magnetics, which is what Jeremy has modeled And then having drilled, after a series of surveys and modeling and airborne surveys, we ended up with the drill hole, which is the deep drill hole, which is KZ DD001, which actually intersected, the Proterozoic. And the realization that there could be another system in addition to what we were looking for in the Karoo system, we then decided to carry on some gravity surveys in order to do modeling and see how that sits with the magnetic survey. And that's what you are seeing right now, a combination of gravity and magnetic modeling. The gravity, we actually did an initial phase of work, about 90 line kilometers of data, done lines 800 meters apart and stations 200 meters. We use the best of equipment that's available, which is the CG5 gravimeter. Uses a fused quartz system, very light weight and elastic crystal of almost pure silicon. It has a sensitivity of 1,000th of a milligram, which is the unit normal used for gravity measurements. So that's how accurate and sensitive this unit is. It's all fully automated, and it is actually as an internal QA system where it rejects data that is not collected properly. Very little drift, and you can do a lot of readings in a day. For us, the teams were able to do 50-60 readings. So we covered that area, and the gray model of gravity model invasion is from that data. So we've since decided we will add more data to it. So there is more gravity surveys planned. Whilst we were looking at this coincidental gravity and magnetic model, which now adds another dimension to our initial quest for economic mineralization in this area, we then tried out, in fact, by looking at historic data, both Kavango is available to its team an audio magnetic telluric system, which, as Jeremy explained, is actually measures natural electromagnetic field, and then the calculation, the ratios of the electrical and magnetic components and the phase differences. You can calculate resistivity, and the frequency determines the depth of that signal using the skin depth principle. So what we end up with is a series of soundings along profiles, and the data normally you'd see 1 to 2 kilometers. But in this environment, which is highly conductive, it does get attenuated quite substantially, and that's the problem that all other methods have faced. But with some innovation, we've been able to one up our game by increasing the stacking when we take readings on the MT, and we are using not only the normal high frequency mode, which reads frequencies between 10 hertz and the 100,000 hertz, shallow depths, so half that profile, 500. It's the first kilometer is the high frequency, and then in addition to that, we have a low frequency mode, which has a frequency range of 0.1 hertz to about 1 kilohertz. So it adds another sort of half a kilometer or more in normal circumstances. For us to do this survey and look where we expect to find this Iocg system, we have had to take a longer time to take readings. In other words, doing more stacking. whilst ordinarily we would take, say, 10 readings per station, we actually increased our stacking to 60 or 80, and sometimes we've even experimented with 100 to increase the level of detail that we find in the 1 to 2 kilometer range, where we are expecting this Iocg, where just below the protozoic that was intersected by KZ DD001.
Thank you.
So it is a very, yeah, it is a very good.
Sorry, I'll carry on.
So it is a very good system, and we've added to our normal survey and high quality data. We've made sure the system is operated by geophysicists, so the data is QC'd before it's recorded right in the field, and the geophysicist is able to determine whether this is the quality data or not. And all the data that you see that we then present forward for interpretation is unfiltered. And what we have added to the method recently is to do some inversion on the data itself. And that's the product that you are seeing now on screen. Very high quality, clean data showing some micro detail of structure, almost as if you're looking across a reflection seismic section. And we've appreciated the use of this instrument so that we're actually expanding its use into other projects.
Excellent, thank you, Hillary. Exactly, that's a very good point to end on, is that obviously we feel that this innovative use of AMT technology, where we've played around with different field spacings and some of the different inputs that Hillary's talked about, and we've ended up with what we believe is a very accurate tool for measuring the stratigraphy, so the layers of rock underneath. And what's obviously one of the fantastic upsides of the recent drill campaign that we've run is that this isn't sort of just geophysics that we're looking at. We've actually got the drill core data to back this up. So we're able now to map the drill core results, so the physical results, against these wonderful results that we're looking at on screen. And we will be talking much more about this via RNS once we're ready to release results. Now, Jeremy, I'd like to come back to this slide in a moment, but before I do, could I ask you please, could you just tell us, just in brief terms, sort of what's the significance of a magnetic anomaly, of a gravity anomaly, and of course what we're looking at for the AMT? So what's what does this actually tell the lay user?
Yeah, certainly, Ben. If you could go back to a previous slide that shows the schematic of the Iocg, that would be great.
The plan view, or the
no, one more to the schematic. One before that. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, the Iocg. Apologies.
That's it.
This
that's
one.
Right. That's schematic. Sorry. Yes, that's perfect. Yeah, we've highlighted here the magnetite alteration and the hematite alteration. And I touched on this in passing, but I think it's good to return to this, as you suggested. The magnetite is going to be quite magnetic, so that should give a fairly strong magnetic anomaly. Typically, for IOCGs, we're talking percent magnetite. It's quite a lot of magnetite in these systems. We've got one drill hole that's got 4%. Some of these IOCG systems are upwards of 10% magnetite, which is quite a bit, and it's quite magnetic. So you're going to get a magnetic anomaly. So one of the characteristics of this sort of idealized alteration system that's sitting above your intrusion is that you get all this magnetite, and then that's going to give you quite a strong magnetic anomaly. And in the case of Olympic Dam, it's quite big. It's a huge system. It's multi-kilometers, and your magnetic anomaly is also multi-kilometers. The hematite is really not very magnetic at all, so it's not going to contribute very much to the magnetic anomaly, but it's actually more dense than even the magnetite. So it's going to add density to the rock, and that should give you a gravity anomaly. So you can see that the hematite alteration and the magnetite alteration are stacked on together, and essentially that's going to give you a coincident magnetic anomaly with a gravity anomaly. And if you can go back to our slide with the inversion, Ben, showing the two inversions combined.
Sorry.
Oh, one back. There we go. That's what we have. And so the pink is the magnetic inversion result. the gray is the gravity inversion result. They're quite coincident. And this is very similar to what Western Mining had when they drilled the Olympic Dam target back in the 1970s. This would have been sufficient conditions for Olympic Dam, or sorry, for Westman to put a hole into this type of target. And but then we've taken it a step further with the AMT data.
So anyway, so could you tell us a bit about the stratigraphy and sort of what we're looking at from the AMT and sort of how that works and sort of what resistivity means?
Yeah, resistivity is the third variable. So we've been dealing with magnetics and the density, and resistivity essentially relates to the type of rock, and it relates to how much the rock is going to conduct electrical energy, essentially. And so this is a whole different set of rock properties. And typically resistivity responds to rock type. It also responds to whether the rock is altered, and also structure. If the rock has structure going through it, such as a fault or a fold, that will usually lead to a change in rock properties. It can drop the resistivity. And so once again, you've got alteration coming in where the structures are, and that's going to change the resistivity. So it's going to give you information about the rock types, but it's also going to give you information about how these rocks been altered, modified by structure and alteration. And Ben, if you could advance to that slide that's got the interpretation on it, the north-south AMT section. This is what we've interpreted here. So we've got what we think are very clear responses for the Karoo sediments in the top 950 meters. You know, they're very nicely flat lying at the left side of the section. That's the south side. They look very deformed on top of the Great Red Spot, which essentially that fits our model that you've had something happen at the Great Red Spot, both in terms of faulting and now we think possibly a shortening event or a compressional event. And so you've got a lot of deformation in the sediments above. And then you've got a lot of things happening in the Proterozoic basement below. It looks like you may have an intrusion. You may have an intrusion within the intrusion, which is interesting. And then you may have alteration zones. So we can't get this from the magnetics and gravity. You don't have that level of resolution. And Hillary could probably speak to this as well. But I found that AMT data, or audio magnetotelluric data, it gives you a lot of resolution to depth. It also gives you a lot of resolution laterally and vertically. You can see some very fine features that are quite deep. So we feel this is actually definitely taking the project in a direction where we can get more information at depth that could help us target in the future.
We'll talk a little bit more about AMT and how we're using AMT for the original KSZ model, the nickel copper sulphide bodies that we're after. But we'll talk about that in a little while and how we feel this technology could give us an edge. But before we do, could I just take us back to something that Hillary talked about? So Hillary said at obviously the beginning of his presentation that what originally attracted him to the KSZ was, of course, the strong magnetic signal that was given and the Great Red Spot itself. Now, I think, Hillary, it's fair to say that when we hadn't actually seen this diagram here that Jeremy produced back in 2000 and was actually published in the Journal of African Earth Sciences. Yep, I've read that correctly. So, Jeremy, I think it's important here to help people understand sort of the importance of the location for this type of deposit style and just quite the significance of there being so many fault lines running through this region and what one can sort of the conclusion one can draw in terms of how much magma might have been drawn up to surface in this area.
Yeah, certainly. There's a saying about this in exploration: X marks the spot. So if you get crossing structures, then you're going to create space. And if you create space, you've got space for intrusions to upwell from the Earth's mantle, and you've got space to conduct alteration fluids. And both of those can be keys for mineralizing events and mineralized deposits. And so here we don't just have two crossing structures. You know, it's not just an X; it's actually more like a star. You've got at least three structures across the KSZ. So you've got 4 intersecting structures at that spot. So you really do have a lot of evidence for what's also referred to in exploration as a plumbing system, that you could have a conduit system to actually conduct magma from the Earth's mantle, and this can be a key for mineralizing events. So we think this is significant, and you know, essentially it's been studied quite a bit. There's an awful lot published on this. There's one geoscientist, Graham Begg, who's published a lot about many of the world's ore deposits actually have these major structures, and some of these are actually continental scale structures that are going right across continents. And so it's really quite neat, and it really seems to have a good foundation in geoscience.
Great, thank you. So before we start sort of opening up to questions, I'd just like to ask one last point. So we talked about our original exploration model. We're going to be releasing the full report on the proof of concept drill campaign in the near future once we're able to finish it. But if I just bring up this north-south cross-section, I'll just remind everybody here, which was of course run sort of from north to south across the Great Red Spot. This is the higher resolution with the closer line spacing. So Jeremy, could you just sort of talk us through a little bit more about sort of what we might be looking at here? And I believe I'm right in saying that the B1 conductor area, we believe, is coincidental with this possible deformation zone. Is that correct?
Actually, the B1 conductor is a bit more to the right. If you could go back to the previous slide, Ben, that's got the Great Red Spot marked on it. One more, that one right there.
This one here?
Yes, perfect. Yep. You see the north edge of the Great Red Spot that's marked with the black dashed line. Is essentially the B1 conductor is up dip from that contact. And so you can see that the Karoo sediments seem to be disturbed or perturbed in that area. They don't look like simple flat-lying sediments. So this is intriguing both from a space-making standpoint. We should point out too, we haven't talked very much about the Karoo model, and I think Hillary, maybe you can talk about that in terms of the Norilsk type model that we have. But essentially, if you have structures within the Karoo, then those are going to conduct Karoo intrusives. So if you have a major structure in the Karoo, vertical structure, say, then you could actually have a Karoo dike that's in place by that structure, and then you could have sills that are in place along the bedding plane that are coming off of that sill. So I really like that model. I think it's quite exciting. And what this is telling us in terms of the success of the AMT program here is that we've refined a tool that not only is it good for looking at the Proterozoic basement, because we can see down to 2 kilometers, but as Hillary was saying, with using the high frequency data, we can get some great resolution in the top kilometers. So the top 950 meters, which is the Karoo. And that's the target zone for Kavango's Karoo intrusive hosted nickel copper PGE program. So you mentioned the B conductor. The B conductor is at the edge of the Great Red Spot, and it's also in an area that, according to this AMT survey, has a fair bit of complexity in terms of the sediments seem to be deformed. You've probably got faulting. So I think, we've got a second tool that we can apply to the Karoo model as well, in terms of we're not just going to do time domain EM, but we're going to do AMT to try and figure out what do the Karoo sediments look like in that vicinity. What can they tell us to add to that model as well?
And so just while we're on the KSZ, I'll just, Hillary, if I could bring you in, I'll bring you to this slide, because of course, you mentioned a bit in your part of the presentation about doing some AMT over some other areas within the KSZ. Now, of course, over to the right, this is target area C, this is target area A, target area B, which contains the Great Red Spot, targets areas D and E. So what we're looking at here is sort of a version of your newest model, which we'll be sort of announcing when it's fully complete. But could you just tell us a bit about your thoughts about how the AMT could be used in conjunction with this upgraded model?
Yeah, firstly, the Karoo model is actually inspired by historic drill holes that actually intersected Karoo-Gabbro. In the early days, we actually did some whole rock geochemistry, which confirmed the prospectivity for nickel in those rocks. And in the recent drilling, we actually intersected some of those Karoo rocks. How the AMT comes in is that now that we know where some of these Karoo rocks are, we're going to try and use the high resolution part of the AMT system to follow these Karoo-Gabbros along strike, in actual fact in 3D, and so that we can see the best areas to target with the TDEM and then follow up with the drilling. So the program we will not only add some more lines on the great red spot in order to define in 3D the zones that may be related to hematitic alteration. But we're also going to be looking now at the much larger units like that target area A, the 30 kilometers on. If you can point to that, the target area A and C areas, we're also going to be doing AMT in there and following up all these Karu-Gabro systems that are prospective for nickel.
Fantastic, thank you. So thank you very much then, guys. So should we open up to questions now? And I think this is probably a good slide for us to stop on, because someone did have a question about this. If you'd like to unmute yourself, feel free, or ask any questions in the chat window. Is there anybody who'd like to ask anything? I'm just keeping an eye out. I think the question was sort of how that works to the left. I've got to be honest, I didn't fully understand the question. Jeremy did, or Hillary did that make any sense to you? Is there anything we can add to that?
I don't think that had completely asking the question. Maybe you can ask again.
I did cut it off.
Yeah.
Oh, so okay. So Barker's unmuted himself. Pete, go on. Have you got any questions for us? Far away.
Yeah, I've obviously been looking at these maps that you're showing, and obviously they're highly interesting from a layman's point of view. But can you tell us a bit more about when you're going to be able to put some meat on the bones? I know it's a long, drawn-out process, and you've taken a lot of patience in making this delivery exactly what we try to understand it is. But, I think a lot of us are trying to understand when we might get some meat on the bones and not just looking very interesting.
Well, completely understand the question. So I think you're talking about sort of the original KSZ model. In terms of meat on the bones for this project, at this stage, this is the most clearly defined target that Kavango's ever had. We've got 4 very distinct data points that we're working with here, with the gravity data, with the magnetic data, the AMT data, and then the physical data from the KSZ DD001 hole and the presence of that magnetite. So obviously this target still needs to go out and be drilled, and until we've drilled it, we won't know what's there. But at this particular stage, as Jeremy said in his presentation, we are now moving to the point of being able to identify specific targets. In terms of the wider KSZ, I mean, as you can see from this presentation tonight, a huge amount of work has gone into this, and this is just one target area. This is a 5 kilometre by 8 kilometre target area, whereas we've now got several hundred square kilometres of targets right across the KSZ, so in the KSZ North and in the KSZ South. We are in the final stages of putting together the comprehensive report on the proof of concept campaign we ran. We're also nearing the end of the latest TDEM that we're running over the B1 conductor. So we're delineating the targets that we missed when we drilled the last hole. Just to remind you, we'd modelled the original target as a single target, and when the drill bit actually passed through the target zone, it turns out there were 2 targets down there, according to the downhole data that we received. So the point about a project like this, Pete, is that it is very complicated. We are a very small company. Now, I know that that's not an answer that a lot of investors want to hear, and it's going to sound like I'm fobbing you off, but we do have just a huge amount of data to work through, and we've got limited resource available to us. In terms of our plans for drilling, at this point, we're not sure. We don't know. We could simply go back and drill the B1 conductor just as a standalone drill campaign in its own right. But from the TDEM results that we're seeing, and particularly now that we've got this AMT technology available to us that enables us, which we didn't have available before. So what we now have is the ability that when we identify these TDEM conductors, so these discrete bodies, we can now map those against this high frequency AMT data that we've gathered for the first time, as you can see with this that we're presenting now. So what we're hoping is what that's going to enable us to do is to get a lot more accuracy with the TDEM data. Now, given that we've only run 9 TDEM surveys over the entire KSZ, we're currently speccing out a reconnaissance TDEM campaign that could stretch to 120 further surveys, and that would only be a reconnaissance campaign. That's across the KSZ North and the KSZ South. I mean, this is a really, really large project. So the choice in front of us, I'll be honest, is quite a difficult one. We can rush out and drill the B conductor, but if it turns out the B conductor is nothing, don't we risk then killing the project? And if we haven't done more TDEM certainly around the Great Red Spot, around target area A, which is 30 kilometers long, and target area C, which is 40 kilometers in strike, at this point in time, we don't know. There might be even better targets just simply waiting out there for us to find. Now, one of the advantages about the TDEM technology is it's relatively low cost. So with some innovation that we've suggested, so Hillary and Jeremy, they've shared ideas with Kaz Lotter from Spectral Geophysics. We've managed to get the cost of the TDEM surveys down quite significantly. So we're able to get a lot more coverage. But at this stage, we're in sort of full data gathering and data analysis mode. So I hope to have the KSZ drill report out in the near future. We'll do another presentation on that nickel copper sulphide model in the same style as we've done this evening when that's ready to go. In terms of next drilling, we're going to wait until we've got that final report before making a final decision.
Cheers, Ben. There is the other thing is the Cass said when you drilled it, the core samples sent for assays. It seems like 6-7 months now. I mean, is there lots of interesting stuff in it that's taken so long to analyse?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Pete, and I'm really glad you raised it, because I think what this actually does is it highlights, I think there's been a misunderstanding among some investors about what this drill campaign was about. Now, the purpose of getting the drill core was primarily to guide the geophysical models, because up until that point, so the underground model that Cav released back in 2020, with the best will in the world, that was educated guesswork. Hillary did fantastic work, but without some core data to help, guide the assumptions that he was building into it, we were flying a little bit blind. So one of the main objectives was to get the data for us to create more accurate modeling, so we'd have more accurate maps to guide, obviously, future exploration. I really can't emphasize how important that was. So the assay tests themselves, or the assay results themselves, are actually not so important, because they point obviously to the wider potential of the system. We've already released the draft petrology reports, so that's already sort of helped give us comfort that we know that this Proterozoic system in particular looks like it's prospective for the kind of ore bodies that we're going for. If when assay results are going to, I think, become much more important is when we go drilling for mineralization. Now, had we hit the B1 conductor in that last drill, then yeah, absolutely. Those assay results, we would have wanted to get those over to the lab, got John Lauderdale, who I can see on the call, to take them down in person and stand over some techie until they gave us the results as quickly as they could. Because of course, at that point, we are looking for grades. But at this stage, the assay results, they're part of a wider, much more complex jigsaw. So we'll be including all of those results within the full comprehensive report on the KSZ proof of concept campaign when it's ready to go.
Right, cheers, Ben.
Thank you. So I can see we've got some questions in the chat window, which I've just missed. Hang on. So I guess maybe, Jeremy, this might be a question for you. So Matt's asked, are there any examples of drill programs where AMT has been pivotal in making discoveries? Yes,
absolutely. I'm actually using AMT on, I think, 4 continents at the moment, and it can be quite important for example, large and deeper type systems. It's absolutely critical for porphyry systems, porphyry copper, epithermal systems related to porphyries. This is all very well established in the Americas for sure, and I think AMT, even over the past, say, 5 years, has really moved forward in terms of the inversion technology. Hillary's receiver is actually one of the best in the world. I found that out last year when I started to review different AMT contractors and AMT systems. So if you've got good technology and if you've got good inversion technology, there's a real proven track record of being able to elucidate mineralized systems. Absolutely.
Thanks, Jeremy. We've had a question on farms. So John, you said on 22nd of March, I commented in an RNS, we'll keep the door open in relation to Malopo Farms. You're asking, has Power Metals' announcement on the 18th of May to acquire KKME shut the door to Kavango? Well, look, we've got a very close relationship with Power. I mean, that's clear. That's in the public domain. They're our joint venture partner down at Ditto and, of course, in the KCB. What I'd say is the door is never shut. I mean, we are always, looking out for projects in Botswana. We really like Malopo Farms. We think it has a great deal of potential. It was very unfortunate that deal didn't close. It was personally quite frustrating, I've got to say. But these things sometimes happen. You can't hold grudges over these things. So we're not in any formal discussions at the moment, but that's not to say that we won't be at some point in the near future. So it's not on the radar right now. We've got more than enough on with Ditto, and as you're seeing in the KSZ with the Iocg. But our door is always open to Paul, and if he wants to have a discussion about KKME and Malopo Farms, it's certainly one that we would have. So got a question from Francis. Right, so Francis, you're asking about the Goldwing theory and does it still hold? So the answer to that is that yes, it does, but they don't relate to this deposit style. So this is a second distinct type of possible mineralization that we're looking for. We'll be doing a full update on the original model, and one of the things we will be talking about was the original Keel and Goldwing theory and what we've learned from the drill campaign. That's going to be one of the key things that we discuss in the comprehensive report that we're looking to produce in the near future. Is the KSZ2 for Cav? It seems to be diluted by the other projects. So very good question. Look, this is a project for one of the big in the market. There are no two ways about it. Cav has the strategic hold over the KSZ. We have had discussions with major firms. It's still a bit too early stage for them. We're on public domain, and we've said this before. However, the progress that we're making at the moment in terms of our exploration model, one of the things that I'm most excited about with the progress we've made over the last 12 months is when we come to publish the report on the drill campaign, we're also going to provide a forward-looking strategy on what we're actually going to do next. So the last phase of exploration in the KSZ was proof of concept. Another aspect of proof of concept for Kavango was proving that our methods worked, that we had a team that actually could do this project justice, and that we had a team that was scalable as well, so that in the event more money were introduced into the company for this project, we could scale up. And pretty much on all fronts, it's been a very, very successful campaign. And you can see that this image that we're looking at now, this just shows sort of how we've innovated as a firm and how we're using modern technology, to the best of its ability. Long term, yes, the project will need to be taken on by somebody, but to get to that point, we've still got more work we need to do. So one of the things we're going to be describing in our strategy is that phase 1 was proof of concept. Phase 2 is going to be target acquisition, where we're going to be looking at, if I just take us back to the slide, hang on, sorry. This slide here. So this shows the northern section of the KSZ. This is a version of it. People will be very familiar with this. We'll be looking across the target areas of both the KSZ North and the KSZ South, looking for as many high priority drill targets as we can. And then, which will then take us into phase 3, which will be drilling for mineralization. The next time we bring the drill bit up to the KSZ, there won't be geological holes we'll be going for again. We've got the geological data that we need for the time being, but we reckon ideally we would drill more geological holes for a project of this size. That would be the ideal solution. But for a company of our size, we know we have to get moving. So the next time we bring the drill bit up to the KSZ, we will be hunting for mineralization. Our job now is to maximize our chances of success. This is a huge prize on offer. It's also a huge amount of ground that we have to cover. So we know that, the odds are against us, but the potential returns that are on offer are just, out of this world. So for us now, with everything that we've learned over the last few years, and we've made mistakes along the way, and we'll be talking about that as well in our report. We'll be talking about some of the things that we got wrong in some of the theories, some of the things that we've looked to improve. That's also part of exploration. It is an iterative process. So I'm really looking forward to publishing that report, and I think that will help answer the question, about sort of whether this is a big enough project for us, because I believe as a firm, we punch well and truly above our weight. So Francis has asked, could you give us some timescales on Cav interests in the copper belt? I can see Brett's on the line. I'm gonna throw that one at Brett. So Brett, I'm asking you to unmute. Are you there? There you go. I like the smile, Brett. There you go. You can field this one. So tell us about the copper belt, Brett.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ben, and thanks for the question. Yeah, so obviously I joined the company in February. I was able to have a visit to Botswana, got a good view of all of our projects. KSZ is extremely exciting, but as well, we have got a significant land holding on the KCB. And like you, I'm keen to see that progress. We have managed to carry out a very substantial geological mapping program there. That's aimed at pulling out the stratigraphic contact that is associated with the mineralisation across the KCB. What we want to do is combine that with other data, such as our past airborne electromagnetics. We've got an ongoing 8,000 sample soil sampling program. Get all that data together and really make sure that when we go in with a drill campaign, which we are anticipating subject to results later this year, that we make sure that that lands with a success. We have already got targets, as we know from the previous work, but we've really got an embarrassment of riches. Which of those do we go after? So it's making sure we've done all of that groundwork first, and then when we go in there drilling, we have the kind of success that have been seen elsewhere on the copper belt. So, for example, one of those projects, I think on the 3rd or 4th hole they put in, they hit an ore body. That's the kind of thing we're targeting.
Thanks, Brett. Excellent. So I know obviously one of the things on the KCB, I mean, I probably jumped the gun a bit, sort of looking to get that drill rig into the field. Obviously, since you've joined the company, you've helped introduce, sort of a lot more rigor in terms of our planning. But can we just talk a bit about sort of in general terms, sort of plans for drilling a bit sort of later on this year?
Yeah, so the best way to hit targets somewhere like the KCB is it's really a meters game. So rather than diamond drilling initially, it's a question of going in with something called reverse circulation drilling. It's something that I started my career with in Western Australia. It gives you a representative sample. It's a percussion drilling method, so it's much lower cost than diamond drilling. Very roughly about 1/3 of the cost per meter. So you're getting 3 times the number of meters for your exploration spend. And that's what I'm keen for us to deliver. Let's get the maximum meters in the ground on the KCB. Let's put it into the places that matter. Obviously, we've got to finalise the current work programme of 8,000 soil samples, get that in, give ourselves a few weeks to review all of that data, consolidate it, work across the team with Hillary, with Jeremy, with our team in Botswana, and then really come up with the best possible targets. And our aim, subject to results, is to be able to drill in around the 3rd quarter of this year. I'm looking forward to that, and I'm hopeful that we'll have some very significant exploration success from it. Obviously, it depends on how everything goes, but we're in a good place.
Great, thank you. So I've been asked a question. Ben, could you comment further on the recent short attack on the share price, and what will be the short-term drivers to get the SP, the share price, back to previous levels? So in terms of the recent short attack on the firm, I am personally convinced that this has happened, and I'm taking steps behind the scenes to do something about it. It's not something I'm going to be commenting on publicly. That's what I used to do years ago when I was an investigative writer. It's not an effective way of dealing with these things, but I do know the rules inside out. I know how to gather evidence of this. I've highlighted 13 very suspicious trades with the support of our broker. One of the things these people have not thought to themselves is that we do have access to a lot of the trade books. So we will be making a report to the FCA, and then we'll just have to leave it up to them as to whether or not they do anything about it. In terms of the drivers for the share price, of course, we've got the Ditto drill campaign, which is ongoing at the moment. We've got some very interesting rocks down there from the 2nd hole in particular that we drilled. We are rushing the assays on those, so we're going to get those done as quickly as we can. But unfortunately, at the moment, with metal prices doing what they're doing, lab space, is at a premium. So that might still take sort of, at least 6 to 8 weeks, we think, before we see those results come through. But that, just going back to the question earlier that I was asked, I think by Pete, about assay tests, this is a great example of where we want to get out there and get those assay results as quickly as we can, because that 28 or 38 meters zone of interest, 29 meters, sorry, zone of interest of ours is very, very interesting. And we really, really want to understand more about that, particularly while we've got a rig in the field. So we want to know, is this something that we should go? From a non-technical perspective, I've shown these photos to a lot of technical people, and they've all pretty much the same thing to me. So we're very interested to see what those results will tell us. In terms of other drivers for the share price, we've got the TDEM work that's being done over the B1 conductor. Jeremy and Hillary, we're doing some excellent work on that in the near future. We're looking forward to publishing the results there. We've got, of course, the KSZ drill report, and of course, all the work that Brett's doing in the KCB with John Lauderdale, our exploration manager. So there's plenty that's going on. We've recently raised money as well to help shore our balance sheet, and we're looking in a really good position. So hopefully, as the market starts to improve, we'll have a flurry of news that should get us trading back up to where I believe we should be. So Francis has asked about the second rig. So that, Francis, that's something that Brett just dealt with. So when he talks about RC drilling, that is the second rig that we will be looking to take on. It's a different rig to the rig that we've used in the KSZ and the DIT. So John is asking, right, so John's asking, so Brett, I think we might need you again on this one.
Yeah.
Can you use RC? Yeah. So just this is a general question. Can you use RC drilling to get to the depth of interest and then switch to diamond drilling to collect samples? It seems to be the best of both worlds.
Yep, so that's a very valid question. And in fact, that is something that I believe Kavango have used in the past. So you do what's called an RC pre-collar, so reverse circulation of percussion drilling at the start of the hole, perhaps the first 100 meters, and then you can switch over to diamond drilling. The disadvantage with that is you do need a reasonably specialized rig. Not everyone's got those. So it depends on what you're ultimately interested in. The advantage of diamond drilling is it gives you whole core. That can be used, for example, to bring out a structural interpretation and obviously identifying minerals. The relationships of those minerals to each other is much easier compared with basically a pile of chips. But in terms of speed, RC is a good technique. It is widely used in Australia, for example, and in West Africa. It depends on the depth of your target. There is a depth limitation to RC drilling on its own. So broadly speaking, and it depends what's happening with water table and so on, if you're talking a target 150 to 200 meters down, a dedicated RC rig can work okay as a first pass. You're really using it for some very deep, it's been called geochemical sampling, but it's a bit better than that. You are getting the type of results that can be potentially used in a future resource. But by all means, I'd be keen to see a switch to diamond drilling later on in the program when we want to get structural information. So you found roughly where the copper mineralisation is in the case of the KCB, and then you want to track down where the optimal structures are hosting that. So really, you need both. Yeah, ideally you'd have a multi-purpose rig. Those aren't always available. So sometimes it's better to go just in with RC initially and switch to diamond later.
Thanks, Brett. So I've been asked another question by Francis. Is there any updates on the possible JV with Mindea? Well, look, Francis, it's worth saying, I mean, to all intents and purposes, we are working in JV with them, albeit we haven't formalised it yet. They've accepted half of their fees, both for the KSZ campaign and the DITAL campaign in equity. It's fair to say the relationship with them is extremely strong. So Hillary's guys at the moment who are doing AMT surveys down at DITAL, we're really looking forward to publishing the results on those. Well, that could also be another driver for the share price in future. They've been using the DITAL of the Mindea camp. So the working relationship between the two companies really is extremely tight. We are going to look to have a sort of a more formal arrangement sort of a bit later on this year, but just being completely frank, we've all got so much on at the moment with everything we're dealing with that to go through the paperwork of that, I mean, it is something we want to get finalized, but it's just a little bit on the pecking order in terms of the current workflow because there's just so much for us to do at the moment. Right, so I think that's it then from questions, unless anybody has any final questions. Well, I'd just like to thank Hillary and Jeremy for your presentation this evening. It really was excellent, very interesting, and a fantastically solid piece of work. And we're obviously really looking forward to getting out and learning more about this. And once you start to tell us more about when we can start to site drill collars for target location. So excited to look forward to that. Brett, thanks very much for joining us as well briefly this evening. I see that there are one or two others of the team who are with us tonight. And thank you all as well. I realise it's bank holiday weekend coming up. So thanks very much for joining us the night before that. And I hope you all enjoy the Queen's Jubilee. So thank you very much for joining us.